Tonight, at some point between midnight and 3 a.m., there is a reasonable chance you will wake up. Not because of a noise, not because of a dream. Just awake, staring at the ceiling, heart rate normal, mind uncomfortably alert, for no reason you can identify. And if you're like most people, your immediate response will be some version of dread. Something is wrong. You're not sleeping properly. You'll be exhausted tomorrow. You check the time, do the mental arithmetic of how many hours remain, and spend the next 20 minutes trying to force yourself back under, which, as everyone who has tried it knows, is almost perfectly designed to keep you awake. Here is what nobody told you: that waking up is not a malfunction. It is not insomnia. It is not a sign that something is wrong with your sleep or your brain or your stress levels, though those things may also be true. That 2 a.m. waking is one of the most natural things a human body can do. Because for most of human history, for the overwhelming majority of the 300,000 years our species has existed, nobody slept in one continuous block. Not because they couldn't. Because that wasn't how human sleep was designed to work. The history of biphasic sleep, the practice of sleeping in 2 separate segments per night, is one of the most thoroughly documented and almost completely forgotten facts about human biology. In 2001, historian Roger Ekirch published research that changed how sleep scientists think about the history of rest. He had spent 16 years combing through historical records, diaries, court documents, medical texts, literature, from medieval and early modern Europe, and he found over 500 references to a pattern of sleep that appears throughout the historical record with striking consistency. People went to sleep shortly after dark. They woke naturally somewhere around midnight. They spent an hour or two awake, talking, praying, reading by candlelight, having sex, lying quietly in thought, and then they went back to sleep until morning. This wasn't insomnia. This was the norm. So thoroughly the norm that the historical references to it treat it as completely unremarkable. The way you might reference eating lunch without feeling the need to explain what lunch is. Ekirch found references to first sleep and second sleep in texts spanning centuries and cultures. Geoffrey Chaucer referenced it in the Canterbury Tales. 16th century medical texts recommended that the time between first and second sleep was the ideal moment for certain activities, including conception, on the grounds that the body was most alert and the mind most receptive. A 1769 medical reference recommended that students use the waking period between sleeps for study, describing it as a time of unusual mental clarity. These weren't descriptions of insomnia. They were descriptions of a biological rhythm so well understood and so universally experienced that nobody thought to explain it, any more than they would explain hunger or thirst. Now here is the part that modern sleep science has confirmed independently of the historical record. In the early 1990s, psychiatrist Thomas Wehr ran an experiment. He took a group of volunteers and placed them in conditions designed to mimic pre-industrial lighting, 14 hours of darkness per night, for a month. Within a few weeks, without any instruction, every single participant shifted into a biphasic sleep pattern. They slept for several hours, woke naturally for 1 to 2 hours, then slept again until morning. And the waking period wasn't anxious or disruptive. Participants reported feeling calm, unusually clear-headed, and relaxed during those nighttime waking hours, a state Wehr described as distinct from either sleep or normal wakefulness, characterized by elevated levels of prolactin, the hormone associated with the peaceful drowsiness that follows sexual activity or deep meditation. The body, given the environmental conditions it evolved under, immediately returned to the sleep pattern it was built for. The experiment didn't teach people biphasic sleep. It just removed the thing that had been suppressing it. That thing was artificial light. The timeline of how biphasic sleep disappeared from human culture tracks almost perfectly with the spread of artificial lighting. Street lighting in European cities expanded dramatically through the 18th century. Gas lighting arrived in the early 19th century. Electric light followed in the late 19th century. And with each expansion of artificial light into the nighttime hours, the historical references to first and second sleep thin out and eventually vanish, replaced by the modern expectation of one consolidated sleep block, and by a sharp rise in references to insomnia, sleep difficulty, and nighttime waking as a problem rather than a natural feature of human rest. Think about what that means. The single most common sleep complaint in the modern world, waking in the middle of the night, is, from an evolutionary standpoint, not a complaint at all. It is your body doing exactly what it was designed to do, in the absence of the artificial lighting that normally suppresses the pattern. When you wake at 2 a.m. and feel that familiar, unwelcome alertness, you are not experiencing a sleep disorder. You are experiencing the natural architecture of human sleep, surfacing through the modern conditions that usually keep it submerged. Your body is not broken. It is trying to run a program that your environment no longer supports. This changes what to do about it, completely. The standard advice for nighttime waking, stay in bed, keep the lights off, try to fall back asleep immediately, is advice designed to force a consolidated sleep pattern onto a body that wasn't built for one. What the historical record and the Wehr experiment together suggest is something different. The waking period between first and second sleep wasn't something ancient humans spent anxiously trying to sleep through. It was a recognized, valued part of the night, a quiet hour in the dark for thought, for conversation, for the kind of reflective, unhurried mental activity that the rush of daylight hours doesn't easily accommodate. Medieval writers described it as a time of unusual psychological openness, when the boundary between the conscious and unconscious mind felt thinner, when insight came more easily, when whatever you were carrying felt both more present and somehow more manageable. There is a reason so many people report their most vivid, seemingly meaningful thoughts arriving in the middle of the night. It isn't random. It isn't a coincidence. That nighttime waking period, in the context in which it evolved, was specifically the time when the human mind was in a state unlike any other in the daily cycle. Not asleep, not fully awake, somewhere between, prolactin elevated, external stimulation minimal, the default mode network of the brain running quietly through whatever it hadn't had time to process during the day. Your ancestors didn't fight that state. They inhabited it. They used it. And many of them, across many centuries, described it as one of the best parts of the night. The industrialization of time did something to sleep that we have mostly absorbed without noticing. It decided that sleep had one job: to be over as efficiently as possible so the working day could begin, and built an entire set of cultural expectations, medical standards, and alarm clock technologies around that premise. 8 hours, consolidated, unbroken, ideally ending at the same time every morning regardless of season or light, or what your body actually wants to do. This schedule works reasonably well for economic productivity. It works less well for the animal that was built to wake in the night, lie quietly in the dark, and let its mind do something that has no name in the modern world, but that every human who has ever experienced it recognizes immediately. You are not sleeping wrong. You are sleeping in a world that forgot how sleep actually works, decided that forgetting was fine, and built a civilization around the assumption. The waking at 2 a.m. that you've been treating as a problem is from the perspective of 300,000 years of human biology, the most natural thing you do all night. The question isn't how to make it stop. The question is what to do with it. The way your ancestors did, in the quiet between first and second sleep, in the dark, with no alarm waiting on the other side, and nowhere to be until the sun came up. They didn't call it insomnia. They called it night. and they knew what to do with it.